will discuss about marginal productivity theory of distribution. As we have discussed in last session, this theory of factor pricing and income distribution. Today we will do the remaining portion of this topic. Now, what are the assumptions of marginal productivity theory of distribution? This marginal productivity theory was introduced by J.B. Clark. J.B. Clark was classical economist who gave this theory. The theory is basically based on some assumptions. And these assumptions are like, we assume that there is a perfect competition in product market. Product market is that market where product or goods can be sold or purchased. We assume that there is a perfect competition. Now, you know about what is perfect competition? Perfect competition is a market where large number of buyers and sellers exist. All sellers produces homogeneous product and all sellers sell homogeneous product at uniform price. There is a full freedom of entry and exit. Firm can enter into the market at any time and firm can exit from the market at any time. So there is a freedom of entry and exit. Under this market, price remains same, product remains same, no selling cost needed in this market. There is perfect mobility of the factors of production under this market. So marginal productivity theory is based on the assumption of that perfect competition exists in product market, same as perfect competition exists in factor market. Factors are four like land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. Factor market is that market where factors are sale and purchased. Factors are those things, those inputs which are necessary for the production of any type of goods and services. Without using factors, we can't produce any commodity. Third assumption is there is a possibility of factor substitution. J.B. Clark assumed under the marginal productivity theory that factors are substitutable or we can use one factor in place of other. Factors are substitutable. There is a possibility. Otherwise, we know that all factors of production are necessary for the production of goods and services. We can't substitute labor in place of land. We can't substitute capital in place of labor. Factors are not perfectly substitutable, but this theory assumes that possibility of factor substitution exists under this theory. Next assumption is divisible factors. Under this assumption, we assume that factors are divisible. It means factors can be divided into smaller parts and factors can be divided in different proportions. For example, land can be divided in smaller parts, but labor can't be divided. If labor is odd in numbers, like 5 labors, we can't distribute or divide labor 2.5 and 2.5. Some factors are not perfectly divisible, and if we divide that factor, their utility will fall. So factors are not perfectly divisible, but this theory assumes this assumption. Next assumption is full employment. Under this assumption, we assume that there is a full employment exists in the economy. Full employment is a situation where all persons who are willing to do work gets job opportunities. It means if there is a full employment, no one will be unemployed. All person will get employment opportunities. But this full employment assumption is also unrealistic because at present, in any economy, either it may be developed or underdeveloped, full employment does not exist. And according to Keynes, at the level of full employment, 5 to 6% unemployment may be exist. And that 5 to 6% unemployment is called natural rate of unemployment. And it may be exist at the level of full employment because some people are voluntarily unemployed. They don't want to do work. They put some conditions while doing jobs and regarding salaries. It means they are voluntarily unemployed. They are not willing to do work. If they are not willing to do work, how you can give employment or employment opportunities to those persons who are voluntarily unemployed? So at the level of full employment, 5 to 6% unemployment may be exist according to Keynes. So full employment is a very rare condition. It's a very unrealistic assumption. But J.B. Clark, under the theory of marginal productivity, assumed this assumption. Next assumption is state of technology remains constant. Under this assumption, we assume that here there is no change or no possibility of change in technology is possible. Technology remains constant. But as you know that at present, technology is changing and new inventions, new discoveries make more advancement of the technologies. And more advanced technology give great contribution in the production of goods and services. So technology can't remain constant. Economy is dynamic. Economy is not static. So no one can remains always constant. Nothing can be stable. Everything is dynamic or variable. So in this theory, here we assume that technology remains constant. Next assumption is law of variable proportion. Under this theory, we assume that law of variable proportion exists. Law of variable proportion tells us that if we assume that some factors remains constant, only one factor is variable factor like labor and land is a fixed factor, as well as we increase the units of labor in the beginning, production will increase. After that, production will become maximum and at last production start falling. This law of variable proportion is the main law of production function, which apply only in short run, in which some factors remains constant and some factors remains variable. We assume that land remains constant and labor is a variable factor. We can change only the units of labor if we want to increase the production level. So this theory assumes that law of variable proportion exists in the economy. It means economy is in the position of short run, or we assume that here short period exists. Next and last assumption is maximum profit. This theory assumes that maximum profit is the main goal of the firm. As we know that each and every producer wants to gain maximum profit. Maximum profit or maximum output at the minimum cost is the main goal of every producer or every firm. So this theory also assumes that firm main goal is to earn maximum profit. But sometimes this maximum profit can't be achieved. This maximum profit goal is not perfectly realistic assumption. So these are the assumptions of marginal productivity theory of distribution, which was presented by J.B. Clark. We assume these assumptions because without these assumptions, this theory will not be applicable in the economy. Next is value of marginal product. As we have discussed in yesterday's session, that there are three types of production. One is marginal physical product. Second is marginal revenue product. Third is value of marginal product. There are three types of production. Production means output and number of quantity or number of units which is produced by the producer. Marginal physical product is the total amount of output or net addition in output while including one more additional unit of any input. MPP is calculated by taking the difference of TPPN minus TPPN minus 1. Or MPP can be calculated with the other method like delta TPP. Delta means change and TPP is total physical product. Divided by delta Q, it means change in quantity. So marginal physical product can be calculated by taking this formula TPPN minus TPPN minus 1. And the second formula is delta TPP upon delta Q. Next concept was MRP, marginal revenue product. This marginal is showing net change. While we introduce one more additional unit of input, then total production will definitely change. If there is a change in total production, that will give the concept of marginal productivity. And marginal revenue product is the net change in total revenue product. And what is total revenue? Total revenue is the total money income received by the seller after selling its output. If there is a net change exist or occur in total revenue product, that will be called marginal revenue product. MRP can be calculated with the help of using the formula like TRPN minus TRPN minus 1. And the second formula is if marginal physical product multiplied by MR, then we can get MRP. So MRP can be calculated by multiplying MPP into MR. MR is marginal revenue. And the third concept of productivity is value of marginal product or VMP. Value of marginal product is equal to the price of the product times the marginal physical product of the factor. It means if we multiply marginal physical product to average revenue, which is always equals to price. So if MPP is multiplied by P or price, then we can get VMP, value of marginal product. As we have studied about perfect competition, market structure of perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, oligopoly market in this BECC 132 paper. Perfect competition in this market, average revenue remains always equals to marginal revenue. So if we multiply MPP into MR and MPP into AR, then there will be no difference between this concept. So MRP and VMP remains always equal in a perfectly competitive firm because MPP into AR will give us VMP and MPP into MR will give us MRP concept. And if AR is equals to MR, then MRP value will be equals to VMP value. So this condition only exists in perfectly competitive firm. Because in monopoly market, average revenue is always greater than marginal revenue. In a monopolistic competition market, AR always greater than MR because both the firms are price maker. But perfectly competitive firm is a price taker. Industry decides the price with the help of demand and supply curve, and firm take over that price which is determined by the industry's demand curve and supply curve intersection. So in a perfect competition market, MRP will be equals to VMP. But in case of monopoly market and monopolistic competition market, VMP will always be greater than MRP. Why? Because AR is greater than MR under monopoly market and monopolistic competition market. So we can draw a diagram. In case of perfectly competitive market, we know that AR is equals to MR, so VMP will be equals to MRP. So MRP is equals to VMP, and this curve will be a downward sloping curve, which presenting that in a perfectly competitive market, both production values will be equal. For example, here is written MRP is equals to MR into MPP, and VMP can be calculated by multiplying AR into MPP. AR, in place of AR, we can write price because AR is always equals to price. So this first diagram, A diagram, is showing that VMP and MRP both are equal because we are assuming that perfectly competitive firm exists in the market. But in case of monopoly and monopolistic competition and in an oligopolistic market, AR always greater than MR. So the value of marginal product will be greater than marginal revenue product. That's why VMP diagram will be above that than MRP curve. So VMP is also downward sloping curve. MRP is also downward sloping curve. MRP remains always lower than VMP because MRP is calculated by multiplying MPP into MR. As we know that MR remains always lower than AR, and AR is the price which remains higher in monopoly market, monopolistic competition market, and oligopoly market. So VMP is calculated by multiplying MPP into AR. So AR is greater than MR. That's why VMP will be greater than MRP. That's why we can draw this type of diagram, and VMP will be greater than MRP, but both slopes have downward or both are negatively sloped curve. Next is the theory of factor pricing, as we have discussed in yesterday's session, that this theory of factor pricing is concerned with the evaluation of the services of factors of production. It deals with the determination of share prices of four factors like land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. These four factors of production are main primary factors because without using these factors, we can't produce any commodity. So we have to determine how much price we have to pay by rendering their services in production process, how much price we must have to pay for each and every factors of production. So pricing of factors of production is a functional, not personal. The reward of factors of production is income from the factors of production point of view, but the cost from firm's point of view. According to the factors point of view, rent, interest, wages, and profit is the income or reward of all these factors of production by rendering or by providing their services in the production process. But if we're talking about the point of view of the firms, so firm have to pay these factors income to the factors of production. So this is considered into cost. So according to firm's point of view, rent, wages, interest, and profit is the cost of factors of production. But in point of view of the factors owner, this reward is the income of the factors of production. So factor pricing theory tells us about how factor pricing is determined and how much price we have to give to each and every factor so that factor continue providing their services in the production process and economy will run smoothly or it may run very smoothly or functioning very properly. The theory of marginal productivity. You must have to remember that the theory of marginal productivity was discussed by many economists, but the main person who gave contribution in this theory was J.B. Clark, Ricardo, and Marshall. So this theory was discussed by many economists like J.B. Clark, Ricardo, and Marshall. We will discuss about all these theories in this topic. It states that in a competitive market, the price or reward of each factor of production tends to be equal to its marginal productivity. According to modern economics, factor price always determined with the help of demand curve and supply curve of factors of production. But according to J.B. Clark, factor pricing is determined by the contribution of factors in marginal productivity. So J.B. Clark explained that we should give reward to each factor of production according to their contribution in marginal productivity. If land is giving more contribution in marginal productivity, then land should get more rent. If labor is providing more contribution in the production of the goods and services, then we should give more wages to the labor. If capital is giving more contribution in productive activities, then we should give more interest to the capital. So we can give all the factors of production reward according to their contribution in marginal productivity. So J.B. Clark tells us that we should fix and we should give factors reward not only by setting the equilibrium price. We should give the price or reward of each factor of production according to their contribution in marginal productivity. And the payment made to the factor of production concerned is just equal to the value of the addition made to the total production on account of the employment of the additional unit. So J.B. Clark was the great economist who gave this marginal productivity theory And this theory tells us that how factor price can be determined with the help of the factor contribution in marginal productivity. And as we have discussed that what is marginal productivity concept and how we can define it, and MP concept is different types we can explain like MRP, different forms of marginal productivity present in this concept like MRP, value of marginal product, and by using the formula we can get MPP, MRP, and VMP also. Next is criticism of this theory. The theory of marginal productivity, which was introduced by J.B. Clark, was criticized by many economists because this theory assumed that perfect competition exists in product market, perfect competition exists in factor market, and there is a applicability of law of variable proportion. This theory assumed that full employment exists in the economy and the firm main goal is to earn maximum profit, and these assumptions are not perfectly realistic or real. So unrealistic integration of monetary and real sectors. That's why this theory was criticized by many economists. This theory is based on unrealistic assumption of perfect competition because perfect competition market is that market in which homogeneous product or uniform price exists. At present, this market is totally a myth market, not exist in real world. So there is no perfect competition in product market and no perfect competition in factor market exist in the economy. That's why this marginal productivity theory was criticized. Next is the assumption of full employment is also unrealistic assumption because full employment can't be achieved, and according to Keynes, at the level of full employment, 5 to 6% unemployment may be exist. That type of unemployment is called natural rate of unemployment. Full employment can be very difficult to achieve, and no one economy, either developed or underdeveloped, at present is fully employed. Because if involuntary people get job opportunities, but at that situation, voluntary unemployed people may be exist. So full employment is an unrealistic assumption. But J.B. Clark assumed that full employment exists in the economy. Next criticism is interest elasticity of factors overemphasized. Some factors are, we assume that elastic, like land is fixed, labor is perfectly elastic. We can increase more and more units of labor. That's why law of variable proportion applicable. And if we assume that land remains constant in short run and labor we can change, as well as we increase the units of labor. In the beginning, production will increase. After that, it will become maximum, and at last, it start falling. So, interest elasticity of factors that explained very overemphasized, we should emphasize in a least way or less way. So, this is also the criticism of this theory. This theory is indeterminate theory. It means this theory, we can't say that it is fully determinate or all the factors of production reward we can fully determine. Because marginal productivity theory, which was presented by J.B. Clark, assumed that we should give all the factors of production reward according to their contribution in marginal productivity. But as you know that all the factors give contribution in production process jointly, and we can't calculate or estimate individual factor contribution in production process. So how we can determine how much individual factor give reward in marginal productivity? So this theory can be said that this is indeterminate theory or not fully determine the factors reward in factor pricing theory. We can explain this criticism by another way also, that this theory doesn't applicable in real life. This theory, we can't say that it is applicable in real life because perfect competition does not exist at present. This theory ignores the increasing returns in factor pricing because this theory is based on law of variable proportion or law of diminishing return or returns to a factor, which is applicable in short run, and in short run some factors remains constant, only one factor is variable, and as well as we increase the units of variable factor, then production in the beginning increases, then become maximum, and at last start falling. So we can't say that always increasing return applicable. So this theory ignore the increasing return. This theory tells us that diminishing return is applicable, but in the beginning, production always increases. Next point is, it's a very difficult to coordinate MRP with factor pricing. It's a very difficult to coordinate with MRP. MRP is marginal revenue product. While deciding or determining the price, factor price, it's very difficult to coordinate with MRP. And the assumption of perfect substitution, it's also unrealistic because factors are not perfectly substitutable. We can't substitute one factor for another. Factors are not perfectly mobile and factors are not perfectly substitutable. So these are the main points of criticism. On behalf of these assumptions, we can criticize this theory, which is not real, or at present in reality it does not apply. Next is rent. The new concept is rent because rent is also the reward of using land. As you know that factors of productions are four: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. Rent concept was firstly introduced by Ricardo. According to Ricardo, rent is the reward for using land only. While land gets rent, Ricardo said that land has some original and indestructible powers. That's why we have to give rent to the landowners. Ricardo said that land gets only rent. No one other factor gets rent. So rent is a revenue from the use of natural resources. Natural resources like land, which is provided by the nature at free of cost. So this rent theory was firstly introduced by David Ricardo. After that, this theory was further developed by John Robinson. Mrs. John Robinson presented this concept rent into economic rent. She said that economic rent is a payment to the owner of any resource in excess of its opportunity cost. It means Mrs. John Robinson said that rent is not the reward using only for land only. At present, whatever commodity or whatever thing we are taking from the market, we have to pay rent. So each and every factor take reward in form of rent. So economic rent is a broader concept which was presented by Mrs. John Robinson. Economic rent is the payment to the owner of any resource. Any resource means either it may be land, it may be capital, it may be labor, any factor, any resource in excess of its opportunity cost. That is called rent. Where in this diagram, we know that supply of factors of production remains constant. That's why supply is inelastic curve, vertical or parallel to the y-axis. Demand curve is downward sloping curve, where demand curve intersects supply curve. Equilibrium price is determined and equilibrium quantity is also determined. And if demand increases, then price will increase, quantity will remain same. So as well as demand increases, we have to pay more economic rent, and the portion which is determined by the intersection of D1 and S curve, that is called economic rent. So rent concept you must have to remember. Rent theory was introduced by David Ricardo, and according to Ricardo, rent is the reward for using land only. Why land gets rent? Because land has some indestructible and original powers. And land is a natural resource provided by the nature at free of cost. And only land owners get reward in form of rent. But John Robinson said that rent is not the reward of only using land only. We have to pay each and every factor by rendering their services in form of wages, interest, profit. That will be called rent. And this concept is known as economic rent. Next is economic rent can be defined as a return over and above opportunity cost or the normal rate of return necessary to keep a resource in its current use. The actual payment is what we are paying to the factor of production, and opportunity cost is that cost which we can define that next best alternative we have to forego for getting one best option. For example, if we have a land area, we can grow either wheat or rice or sugarcane or peanuts. If peanuts give us maximum output or maximum profit, then we must have to sacrifice the production of wheat, rice, and sugarcane. So the opportunity cost of producing peanut is wheat, rice, and sugar. So economic rent can be defined as a return over and above opportunity cost or the normal rate of return which is necessary to keep a resource in its current use. Next is economic rent refers to the actual payment made for the use of land only. It is determined after completion of production process on the basis of total value of production and the opportunity cost of the factor. Economic rent, it is the residual amount of the gross rent after deducting other various amounts and also called a pure rent. According to the concept of economic rent, which was introduced by Mrs. John Robinson, economic rent can be estimated or can be calculated by deducting transfer earning from actual earning. So actual earning minus transfer earning is the formula of calculation of economic rent. What is actual earning? Actual earning is the person who are actually earn from the present job. If we assume that actual earning is 20,000 of a person from the present job and the transfer earning is 18,000 which he was taking from the previous job. So this 2,000, the difference of this actual earning and transfer earning is called 2,000 is economic rent. If actual earning is equals to transfer earning, then no economic rent will be arise. If actual earning is less than or actual earning is zero, then only transfer earning will exist, no economic rent will arise. So economic rent can be calculated by using this formula, actual earning minus transfer earning. Next is modern theory of rent. Traditional theory of rent was propounded by David Ricardo. And according to David Ricardo, rent is the reward only for using land. But the modern theory of rent propounded by Mrs. John Robinson. According to John Robinson, the essence of the conception of rent is the conception of a surplus earned by a particular part of a factor of production over and above the minimum earning necessary to induce or motivate it to its work. So the essence of the conception, it means economic rent is a surplus income, or economic rent is the excess or above of the actual earning and transfer earning. A surplus income earned by a particular part of a factor of production over and above the minimum earning necessary to induce it to its work. This theory assumes that rent is determined with the help of productivity of factors and its opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is also known as transfer earning. Rent is determined with the help of demand and supply of factors of production, according to this modern approach. Next is economic rent. There are three situations of economic rent. We can determine, or it's a determination conditions of economic rent. There are three situations. If supply of factors of production is perfectly inelastic, it means if supply can't change and factors are inelastic, or factor supply is perfectly inelastic, it means supply can't increase or can't decrease, then what will be the condition of economic rent? If supply of factors of production is perfectly inelastic, curve will be vertical, then the entire income will be economic rent and therefore transfer earning will be zero. In the second case, we can show all these three situations with the help of diagrams also. If supply of factors of production is perfectly elastic, elastic is which can change and inelastic means which can't change. For example, land. The supply of land can't change because it is provided by the nature at free of cost. So land supply you can't increase or decrease. The man-made things which is developed by human beings, that can be increase or decrease. But the natural resources or the resources which is provided by the nature, that can't be increase or decrease. So that these factors supply is called perfectly inelastic supply. If supply of factors of production is perfectly elastic, which can increase or decrease or which can change, then the entire income will be transfer earning and therefore economic rent will be zero. The third situation is if the supply of factors of production is neither perfectly inelastic nor perfectly elastic. In that case, Some portion which lies above the supply curve will be called economic rent, and the rest of the portion which lies below the supply curve, that will be called transfer earning. So if supply of factors of production is neither perfectly elastic nor perfectly inelastic, then proportion which lies above the supply curve will be economic rent and the rest will be transfer earning. We can show these three situations with the help of three diagrams. These three diagrams presenting the situation of perfectly inelastic supply. First diagram showing when supply is perfectly inelastic, then curve will be vertical parallel to the y-axis and demand curve is downward sloping curve, and where demand and supply curve intersect each other, equilibrium point is determined, and at this equilibrium point, equilibrium price and quantity also determined, and the shaded area, the whole portion of this box is known as economic rent. When supply can't increase or can't decrease, supply remains constant, then the whole proportion will be called economic rent. Here transfer earning will be zero. In the second diagram, where supply is perfectly elastic, that's why demand supply curve is horizontal or parallel to the x-axis. Demand curve is downward sloping curve, where demand and supply curve intersect each other. Equilibrium point is determined, and at this equilibrium point, all shaded area or all this box which is showing this transfer earning. When supply can increase or decrease, then economic rent will not arise. All proportion will be called transfer earning or opportunity cost. And in third case, in the C diagram, when supply is neither perfectly elastic nor perfectly inelastic, in that case, supply curve will be upward sloping curve and demand curve will be downward sloping curve, where both curve intersect each other. Equilibrium point is determined. At this equilibrium point, quantity will be determined and equilibrium price will also determine. And we are seeing that here the portion which lies above the supply curve is called economic rent, and the below proportion which lies below the supply curve is called transfer earning. So these are the three situations of economic rent. Economic rent can arise only in case of perfectly inelastic supply. In case of perfectly elastic supply, economic rent will not arise. And if supply is neither perfectly elastic nor perfectly inelastic, then half proportion will be economic rent, which lies above the supply curve, and remaining or rest of the portion will be transfer earning, which lies below the supply curve. Next is, we can draw individually of these diagrams. If supply is perfectly inelastic, demand curve is downward sloping curve, where both curve intersect each other, equilibrium price and quantity will be determined, and this box which we have drawn, this box is showing that whole income or whole proportion is economic rent. Here transfer earning is zero. Next is economic rent and transfer earning. When supply is neither perfectly elastic nor perfectly inelastic, then half portion or above the portion which lies above the supply curve will be economic rent, and the portion which lies below the supply curve will be called transfer earning. In this case, demand curve will be downward sloping curve, and this blue line shows supply curve which is neither perfectly elastic nor perfectly inelastic. That's why this is upward sloping curve, where both curve intersect each other. A point is determined, W is real wage or equilibrium price, and OQ is equilibrium quantity, and the B area, the point B is showing economic rent, and rest of the proportion which lies below this point is showing transfer earning. Next is, We can show these three situations with this combined diagram. Economic rent and elasticity of supply of a resource can be shown with the help of this combined diagram. Here, S1 supply curve is showing perfectly inelastic supply situation. S2 supply curve, which is horizontal line, is showing perfectly elastic supply, and S3 supply curve is showing neither supply is perfectly elastic nor inelastic. Demand curve is downward, only single diagram will be drawn. Where all these curves intersect each other, equilibrium point E is determined. At this equilibrium point, when supply is perfectly inelastic, whole portion will be economic rent. When supply is perfectly elastic, whole portion will be transfer earning. When supply is neither elastic nor perfectly inelastic, then the area which is above the supply curve will be economic rent and rest of the portion will be transfer earning. Next concept is economic rent and contract rent. What is the difference between economic rent versus contract rent? Economic rent was presented by Mrs. John Robinson, and this modern economic rent theory, all the factors of production like land, labor, capital, entrepreneur are assumed to earn rent. But the contract rent refers to the gross payment to the owner of the factors in exchange for their use. The concept of economic rent is defined as the excess amount over the transfer earning that is paid to the owner of the factor. And the contract rent is what we usually practice in our day-to-day life. Sometimes it is referred to as a gross rent. Economic rent concerns with the economic meaning of rent, and contract rent concerns with the practical meaning of rent. So this is the basic difference between economic rent and contract rent. Contract rent is a gross payment to the owner of the factor in exchange for their use. But economic rent is calculated by subtracting transfer earning from actual earning. Next concept of rent is quasi-rent. This is very important concept, quasi-rent. This concept was introduced by Alfred Marshall. Quasi-rent is the surplus earned by man-made factors of production such as buildings, machines, etc., rather than land. Because rent is the reward for using land only, according to David Ricardo. Rent is the reward for using all the factors of production, according to Mrs. John Robinson in a modern theory of rent. But quasi-rent only occur in short period. And this rent concept, quasi-rent concept, was introduced by Alfred Marshall. And this quasi-rent only arises in case of man-made factors of production, such as building, machines, etc. It is earned in short period of time when the supply of man-made factors of production remains constant or unchanged. Quasi-rent disappear in long run. Rent will always arise in short period as well as in long period. But quasi-rent only arises in short period. You must have to remember this thing, that quasi-rent only arises in short run during a short period due to the shortage of man-made goods. In long period, as you know that all the factors of production are variable, we can increase the supply of any commodity according to the demand, then quasi-rent concept will disappear in long run. Quasi-rent is the excess of total revenue over total variable cost. Its formula is when total revenue is more than TVC or total variable cost, then quasi-rent will arise. How we can determine quasi-rent concept? First of all, we will draw average cost curve, which is always U-shaped curve. MC is also U-shaped curve, and MC always cuts AC at its lowest point. If we assume that AR and MR remains constant or horizontal line, here average revenue is equals to price is equals to OP1. OP1 is the price, and where AC and MC intersect each other at n point, both the costs are minimum or lowest. The difference between F to N, the gap between F and N, is called quasi rent. So quasi rent only arises when total revenue is more than total variable cost, or the gap between this MC and AC is showing quasi rent. Next is, what is the difference between rent and quasi rent? Rent accrues to land only, but quasi rent accrues to man-made appliances. The supply of land remains always constant, but the supply of man-made appliances remains constant only in short period, not in long period. But the supply of land remains always constant, either it may be short period or long period. Rent enters into prices. Quasi-rent does not enter into prices. This is the basic difference between rent and quasi-rent. Next, marginal productivity theory of wage. This theory was also propounded by J.B. Clark, A.C. Pigou, and Marshall. As you know that wage is the reward for using labor. Wage rate is determined where the marginal productivity of labor is equals to its price. Marginal productivity of labor is the amount by which output will increase as per unit increase of labor. Every labor should receive wage rate equal to the value of marginal product. Wage rate is determined by the intersection of demand and supply curve of labor. Labor market. What is labor market? Labor market is that market where labor can sell or purchase. Demand curve for labor is always downward sloping curve, and supply curve of labor is always upward sloping curve. Wage rate can be determined with the intersection of demand and supply curve of labor, and demand curve is downward, supply curve is upward. But sometimes labor supply curve may be backward bending curve. It's a very important thing. You must have to know about this thing. Okay, why labor supply curve is backward bending curve? So to explain this concept, here two factors are responsible. One is substitution effect, other is income effect. The substitution effect states that a higher wage rate, first of all, labor will do more work and substitute leisure. Therefore, in response to higher wage, supply increases because work gives greater remuneration. And second effect, income effect, when this effect is applicable, then at higher wage rate means workers can achieve a target income by working fewer hours. Therefore, if wages increases, it becomes easier to get enough income through working fewer hours. So, labor supply curve in the beginning increases, and after that it slopes backward or downward. That's why labor supply curve is always backward bending curve. But this can be happen only in case of individual labor, not in aggregate labor. Individual labor can increase work in a beginning stage, and after that it will decrease the work. It will prefer more leisure than work. That's why supply curve of labor will be backward bending. Now conclusion. The theory in this chapter is called the New Classical Theory of Income Distribution. It states that factor price is determined by the demand and supply curve. Each factor is paid the value of its marginal product. Most economics use this theory as starting point for understanding the distribution of income. Thank you.